Hello, everybody. This is the Cincinnati Herald podcast. I'm your host, John Alexander Reese, digital editor of the Cincinnati Herald. If you don't know, the Cincinnati Herald has been around since 1955 and is the largest African American newspaper in the greater Cincinnati area. And today, my guests are co-host and media consultant for the Cincinnati Herald, Andria Carter. How are you doing today, Andrea?
Fine, John. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. And we also have with us our Herald intern, Suhana Sinha. How are you doing today, Suhana?
I'm doing fantastic, John. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. And we have a special guest with us today, architectural historian Deqah Hussein Wetzel. How are you doing today?
Hi, great. Thank you for having me here too.
Awesome. So let's head into some of the top news topics of the week. The two young men killed in a July 4th shooting at Smale Park likely attacked each other, Police Chief Elliot Isaac said Monday afternoon. 16-year-old Princeton High School student Milo Watson and 19-year-old Dexter Wright Jr. had a pre-existing disagreement that they brought with them to Smile Park Sunday night, according to Isaac's account of the shooting. Police were in the park at 10:48 p.m., attempting to clear out roughly 400 July 4th celebrants ahead of its 11 p.m. closing time when shots sounded and the first 911 calls came in. Watson died at the scene. Wright lived long enough to be briefly hospitalized but died overnight. Three other teenagers, two girls and a boy, all under the age of 18, were injured in the crossfire. All three are hospitalized. One, a 17-year-old girl, has severe injuries that could threaten her life. Andrea, what are your thoughts on this very tragic story?
Well, I think it's horrible that these two young men, whatever the disagreement was, they chose to complete the disagreement with using guns instead of thought. But unfortunately, it's indicative of what has happened today with our youth. They're choosing to end arguments and skirmishes with a gun instead of their mouths and fists. And there's a lot of reasons of why, or influences of why this is occurring. Everyone is looking for a solution. And I think it's just more than just one band-aid solution to resolve this. I mean, everyone is going to be having a community meeting. There's one on Saturday at New Prospect Church. There's another one planned on the 12th by the Southern Christian Leadership chapter here in Cincinnati. The school board, there's an article from the school board members talking about what they can do. Everyone can do it. Everyone's been talking about it. Some of the older political leaders have been talking about trying to find a solution, which, any older political person who's been around for a very lengthy time and has not come up with a solution now on this problem and is cyclical, they should not be reelected at this point, because they've had more than enough time to offer up solutions and to help work on the problem and be visible and upfront about it. And as I think of now is proven that it's all been talking points, and we need more than talking points on this.
Suhana, what are your thoughts on this story?
It's so disappointing that on the day of 4th of July, where everybody is out on the roads celebrating and in trying to enjoy themselves, such an incident happens and it affects young children so much. I believe that nobody can really predict that who's going to shoot, but when somebody does that, regardless, it says about the dissatisfaction the society has with the system that governs them. I'm not even sure what they fought about and how the matter became that one of them had to pull a gun and use it in such a way that it affects more than one person's life. I think the police should do a little more investigation on it, because the crime has been happening since I think early 2000s, since the early beginnings of the pandemic. And I'm sure it must have had a few cases here and there before that. But in either case, if it's a co-current problem and it keeps happening over and over again, we don't need it to happen one more time to make another statement or think about what to do when this happens again. I'm glad that they are having discussions and meetings, and as Miss Andrea said, I think some major actions must be taken, because it's not a big country, it's not a whole continent, it's a very small place. And if we are not able to, as a community, not able to care for even such a small place, how are we going to do better contributions worldwide?
And moving on to our next story. Investigative journalist Nicole Hannah Jones says she will not teach at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill following an extended fight over tenure. Hannah Jones announced her decision during an interview on CBS This Morning on Tuesday. She said that she would instead take up the night chair in race and investigative journalism at Howard University, a historically Black school in Washington, D.C. Andria, your thoughts on this story?
I applaud her for her actions. I think the University of North Carolina, they were wrong. They were wrong to listen to a board member who objected, who was a publisher himself. They were wrong to feed into him, but then I shouldn't even say feed into, but they all caved into their perceived perceptions regarding the 1619 project. And I think that if you cannot accept the truth about history, then what else can't you accept the truth about? I think she is set the new model for not have to put up with systemic racism. She found a university not only offered her tenure, not only offered her the ability to develop a new division in investigative journalism, she's bringing money with her. She's bringing $15 million with her to set up a foundation on investigative journalism. UNC walked away from that because she was setting up a program foundation with people with worth up to $25 million investment were going to back her. And they lost that investment. That says a lot about them. And that says a lot about the racism at the university that, they chose a color of someone's skin and what their actions over the investment of the future of educating the students at the school. And as she said, she's not responsible for fixing systemic racism. That's up to them to fix it. But instead, it's up to the responsibility of Black professionals to go to our institutions and take our skill sets to them and make them stronger and better.
And Deqah, did you want to chime in on this news story?
Yeah, I mean this one and or the last one too, but this one, yeah, like it just goes to show how people still can't have conversations about race and history and honestly, I think that's pretty sad. If we can't support the people who are doing really important things to improve Black relations or just have people be more aware that slavery happened, what are our educational systems really doing? They I know that in my pursuit of higher education, finding young Black scholars are very few and far between, and those are the people that I would as a younger Black woman be interested in working with. And so it's really, it's not cool that the university is just going to allow for donors and people with money to make decisions for them.
Suhana, your thoughts?
I think, John, it's a power move. It's something amazing she has done. If, first of all, what the university did to her was very insulting, and it took a whole public outrage for them to change their mind. I believe, as an individual, if I had to step into a professional environment after putting so much fight to get my right position there, I would wonder what would happen later after this whole outcry dies. What is my Can I see this university as my family after what incident has happened with me? If anybody found the time to read through her essay, they will find out that what decisions she took under the circumstances is it resonates a lot with what she has written in her essay for the New York Times. I think it is wonderful that she has chosen a university that was originally started by the community members of Black community, and she has chosen to extend her expertise there. And it couldn't be a better time, because it's not that she had it originally in her mind that she would like to extend her services like this. But I think she understood through this whole experience with the Chapel Hills that she has to stand by her community, and though whatever people say, she has to extend the best of her support, because this is what she wrote and this is what she tried to inform people. And I think when you take a decision like that, where you are almost rewriting the history and informing people what's the deeper truth, you somehow take this attribute of a role model. And when you are a role model, you are so much more than just your ordinary self. And I think she would have, as any normal employee, would have gone along with it. And I think anybody would have gone along with the Chapel Hill's decision. But at the decision and the position she took of herself in the society, I think she had to stand by it, and she stood by it very wonderfully. Couldn't be more proud.
And moving on to our next story. American champion Sha'Carri Richardson cannot run in the Olympic 100-meter race after testing positive for THC, a chemical found in marijuana. Richardson won the 100 at the Olympic trials on June 19th. She got told of her ban Friday on the Today Show. Richardson says she smoked marijuana as a way of coping with her mother's recent death. She tested positive at the Olympic trials, and so her result is erased. Andria, your thoughts on this story?
I think it's sad that she is at the height of her game and she can't perform at it. But at the same time, she's the best example. She's the best role model for what not to do when you're at your peak and you're up on that mountaintop of success, and one wrong decision will topple you down so far that it'd be a struggle to get back up again. I understand that, marijuana is relaxing. People like to smoke it. It's, I understand grief of a mother passing is devastating. I just got through it. But at the same time, you're an Olympian. You're held to a higher standard. I don't care what category you're in, you're held to a higher standard. You don't do it. You wait for after you've reached that peak. She could have waited until after Tokyo. I feel bad for her, but at the same time, your actions speak louder than words. And I'm sorry.
Deqah, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, well, the Olympics are international and not national. So I think we can, my opinions would be a lot stronger if this was just a national issue because, so many states are legalizing and it's seen as medical usage. But, for that fact, that's, it is unfortunate that there are rules and, you can't really do much about it. I do know that lots of athletes struggle with anxiety. I mean, a lot of people struggle with anxiety. A lot of people struggle with that, but they also, could turn to other things and it would like as anybody else can turn to alcohol or something else that could be way more detrimental to their health and their body. So, I think that the issue is the way that we all see marijuana as a, I'm pretty sure it's never killed anybody ever. Like that's literally a statistic. We also know that that is the type of drug that is, seen as quote unquote gateway. And it's just like the mentality, I think, that exists around it is very old school. And it just, should be put into the conversation. Maybe that is something to discuss. This is not the first time this has happened in the Olympics. There's questions with Michael Phelps at one point, and people had their opinions with that one too. So, I think that we all need to work together to kind of really identify where the biggest issues lie, and especially, dealing with what people are doing in the Olympics. I don't know. I never understood how honestly alcohol can be seen as completely okay in a lot of ways, and marijuana is seen as just like the devil. It's not, neither one might be great, but it's just a little bit of a double standard, I kind of think.
Suhana, your thoughts on this story?
I would agree with Ms. Deqah on a lot of these points. I think coming from a very old school and higher standards of sports history, it's very difficult now with the times changing to live by that. And I think it would be nice if it would be, I think, better if there is a whole conversation about it again. That how much, what are the rules, or does some rules need some leniency, or some things need to be changed? I can't imagine what kind of pressure as an individual Richardson must be dealing at that point, because you're literally all going to Olympics and at the same time grieving over the loss of your mother, and it must have been a very emotionally heightened time of her life, and she must be still going through it. I think more than the conversation around marijuana and should she be allowed to play or not, I think as a society, we should extend a little more compassion towards her as an individual, because everybody comes from certain experiences and that makes them what they are. Though this particular incident doesn't define what whole of she is as a person, and who am I to judge here. But I think by the time we understand or get some clarity about what kind of athlete she is or how she's going to perform in future, we should, as human beings who are going through tough times, extend some kindness towards her circumstances and wish her all the best for the next project, whatever she's going to take in. And I hope she feels better. And if she needs a break or she needs to go through her process to feel better, then I think she should do, and not care about a lot of things around her, but she should focus on her healing at this point. And I think it's not a big deal. Finding THC in her body, it's not a big deal. And it was not done out of malpractice. It was not done to get some advantage in the race. It was just done to cope with themselves. And I think it's not very criminal. It has its own penalties, but I don't think people who see this news should feel that it's a horrendous crime that she has committed. It is just normal.
Let's move on to our next story. An official says Haitian President Jovenel Moïse has been assassinated after a group of unidentified people attacked his private residence. Interim Premier Claude Joseph says First Lady Martine Moïse is hospitalized. Joseph condemned what he called a hateful, inhumane, and barbaric act. He said Haiti's national police and other authorities have the situation in the Caribbean country under control on Wednesday. The killing comes amid deepening political and economic instability and a spike of gang violence. Andria, your thoughts on this tragic story?
Well, I think it's tragic, and the fact that he was assassinated, one, in his own bed, which is horrific in itself, and I feel sorry for his wife. But I think too, the fact that he was ruling Haiti, there is no parliament, there is no Senate, there is no VP, there's nothing. So he was the government. So someone seized upon this opportunity to be able to take over. And I think this is a worst case scenario of what can happen to a democracy. Haiti has always been turbulent. It's still trying to stabilize itself with, elections and things like that. Even the president's assassin, even though the former president, when he was elected in 2017, there was controversy over the election. But supposedly he had promised to smooth things out and then dissolved everything. So it's going to be interesting to watch the next steps of what's going to happen and see how the people react. Well, either react to who takes over or rise up to demand a full functioning government and not just one dictator.
Deqah, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I think that with underdeveloped countries or countries that don't have stable governments, I mean, this is something that we see in my home continent of Africa a lot. Things get quite out of hand and people rebel. And, these things can only go on for so many decades and centuries, I think. Internationally, I think that, whatever entities, UN or whatnot, should really start to, look at these particular dictatorial issues, like issues for having dictators as presidents. They should really take a look at that and see what could possibly be done as a whole. I mean, I know it's a very touchy, very crazy subject to even try to begin to figure out what to do, because every country's very much got their own different reasons for instigating a violence, but it's just, I mean, it's kind of overboard to go in and have this kind of massacre happen. It sounds that it must have been elaborate of sorts to be able to get through security and whatnot. So it's unfortunate, and I think that we could do better as a whole, as like as an international group, to look at this and say, hey, yeah, well, how can we help? What can we do? I don't particularly know the answer to that, but I just hope that somebody out there might have an interest in trying.
Suhana, your thoughts on this story?
John, as we mourn over the killing of Haiti president all over US and wherever the news has reached, citizens of Haiti are not quite sad, I must say. Several reports are saying that this was a very sophisticated planning his execution, and it's very rare occurrence. You don't see killing of president just because of political instability in a lot of time. It's usually when the cases are very severe, then this goes. Haiti has been existing as a very popular tourist destination, and while existing that same image, such a turbulent scenario has occurred is quite fascinating, I must say, to the least. People were dissatisfied with the now late president because of the connection he has shared with United States and the support he garnered there. For a while, people have been wanting him to step down from his position, but with some international support, which reports are saying from US, he has been staying in power for a while. I don't know. Usually, after the death of a very strong political figure, huge chaos erupts. I don't know how it's going to affect Haiti's economy and daily life of people, but a lot of people are going to be persecuted for this, and I hope it doesn't turn into a bloodbath. We don't want to lose one more place to never-ending eternal chaos. If through some diplomatic relations and after some give and take, if we can get some political stability there, it will be great for the future for of Haiti. But my condolences to the president's family who are experiencing this grief, and I just hope, and my condolences to the citizens who are going to take the heat of this circumstances, and I hope they can find a better life and future out of this whole situation. All the best to Haiti, because it should not turn into another chaos.
And moving on to our final story. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams has won the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City. Adams triumphed over a large field in New York's first major race to use ranked choice voting. The ballot count published Tuesday night is the fourth of the primary vote, as preliminary counts were held in the new system to see who would advance. Adams defeated rivals including former City Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia, civil rights lawyer Maya Wiley, and former presidential candidate Andrew Yang. Andrea, your thoughts on this story?
I think it's very exciting. I think what he did, how he did it, how he rose through the ranks. For someone who's never held a political office, what he did to navigate the chaotic waters of a New York primary, I should say a New York City primary, is interesting to see how his strategy unfolded. And the fact that he is a former New York City police officer, he used that to his advantage when people start talking about crime and police reform and things like that. I've been reading up on his win, and they were saying that what he did was a good blueprint for Democrats around the country on how they could use his argument and framework regarding police reform, being tough on crime. And instead of, as people cry, defund the police, and said, no, 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 we need to reform the police because we still need them to combat this, overwhelming epidemic of youth gun violence. And I think he used that to his advantage. And I think it's fantastic. And I can't wait to see what he does as mayor.
Deqah, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I think this is why I love ranked choice voting. It makes it a lot more fair for people's votes to actually be heard and counted and really feel like it's making an impact. Without that, might have been switched and somebody else might have gone ahead, and that just kind of goes to show how important ranked choice voting can be within our entire system. I think, for example, ranked choice voting for like the primaries, like Democratic primaries or Republican, whatever, like that would be a huge game changer. So, yeah, it's impressive to me that, New York's jumping on the bandwagon to do ranked choice voting, and it's starting to be seen in different places and how it works and how it actually makes voting more inclusive.
Suhana, your thoughts?
John, little that I know of, New York has a history of a lot of crime and interracial violence. I feel like, I'm saying this with utmost sincerity, but it's a little bit fun behind it. It feels like a plot out of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And a retired police officer is now a mayor of New York. I think it's quite interesting because the candidate who has come in power is a person of color and a person who understands the severity of the situation because of their past experiences. I think it's going to be very exciting and there's a lot more changes that are coming our way. Of course, changes are very tough to make happen considering it takes cooperation from a lot of people, but considering that Eric won with so many popular votes, I think he's going to garner this decent amount of support. And I'm excited what's coming for New York. Let me see, like when I visit New York next time, how safe I feel in the city. That's about it for me.
And those are all of the top stories of the week. So now I'll hand it over to my co-host, Andrea, to talk to our special guests.
Thank you, John. And it is my pleasure to introduce Deqah Hussein Wetzel, who is a historic preservationist and urban planner. And she, with her partner Vanessa Quirk, are the producers of the Urban Roots podcast, which is a narrative of urban America, utilizing rich archival materials, interviewing passionate local experts, and exploring untold stories. She's been taking a look at various Cincinnati neighborhoods in the area, and I just like to say hi, Deqah.
Hey, Andrea.
Thank you for joining us today. And can you, in your own words, tell us a little about Urban Roots? I mean, I need to disclose that I am subject of one of her podcasts talking about Avondale, North Avondale. But give an overall, in your views, what was the inspiration for creating Urban Roots?
So, Urban Roots it's not really your traditional history podcast. I really wanted to create something that makes people start to think, a little bit more about how their cities function and how the history of their city has impacted the present day. And so, as I studied urban planning, I realized that so much has happened in the past that seems to be repeating. And then I studied historic preservation in graduate school and found that, oh yeah, okay, well, these are answers to my questions here. Yes, absolutely. These, these planning theories and planning policies from the past are really what's impacted our histories today. And when I lived in Oregon, I sort of started to realize, well, why is this place so white? What makes this place just, so lacking in diversity? And I investigated and I found out the reasons were tied to their historical past. They had laws that prevented Black people from staying in the state, that lasted until the 1920s. To me, when I've been working in historic preservation and doing archival research and looking in newspapers just for, simple things like reports or historic context, like, in the actual historic preservation architectural history field, which is like technically cultural resource management, is kind of what it's called. And I would come across some pretty horrific stories on lynchings and riots. And I would also find impressive stories about strong Black women who've done really, really cool things. And it seemed like people didn't really know much about those cool things that those impressive Black women had done. So all that together kind of made me think, okay, well, how do I, utilize my love for really podcast being an educational and public history tool, to make planning and preservation more accessible and inclusive. And so me and Vanessa came up with Urban Roots.
So what neighborhoods, I'm looking at a list right now. You have done podcasts about Evanston and Avondale. Where else have you done a podcast about, but it hasn't come out yet?
Yeah, so I started, so Vanessa and I started the Lost Voices of Cincinnati series that we started producing in the beginning of 2021 after we won a Truth and Reconciliation grant from ArtsWave. And I partnered with Invest in Neighborhoods to figure out the important communities to highlight that, I could apply for this grant and be like, what can we do here? How can we most benefit the communities in Cincinnati? and we decided to work with Avondale, Evanston, and South Cumminsville. And so the last episode that has not come out yet is South Cumminsville, and that will be out July 17th, which actually will be accompanied by, on that same day, the Truth and Reconciliation Arts Wave event at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. So that will be a big showcase of all the artists, or a lot of artists who had things that they could produce to be able to be showcased there. And for the listeners, just if you want to keep up with that on Instagram, you can follow at Urban Roots Culture, and we will help you stay up to date with the things that are happening.
Well, what were some of the inspiring stories that you heard from the Evanston and the Avondale podcast that really sit with you?
Well, in Evanston, it was really inspiring to speak with Mary Ward, who had attended St. Mark's School, and her, enthusiasm that she kind of explained, when she was a kid, about going into the school for the first time and seeing these nuns who she didn't realize were nuns. She didn't know what they were. They were just these ladies in some robes. And I thought that that was just so great, because it went to show that, not everybody really knows what everything is. And you really learn a lot by, your what you go through in school, but then, she still comes out of it with this strong tie to St. Mark. And I think that's really cool and really impressive. And, with Avondale, I think that the stories I thought were super impressive were just hearing how, including you, Andria, the Black women that I interviewed were, working really, really hard to do really moving things in their communities in Avondale. And I thought that that was just, super inspiring. And then, the things that I learned about the communities, the thing that I learned about Avondale was really the, fact that it really experienced a different kind of white flight back in the mid-century, that it used to have a strong white Jewish population, and then it's over time become more African American. And the reasons for that are explained in the podcast, but I didn't really know. And I'm, sitting there just thinking, how inspiring is it that these women and the people that they've been involved with, their parents and aunts and uncles and other, just, really significant Black people in the community who have worked for civil rights, these women are tangentially involved with or associated with. And I just was, blown away by everything that they do and they keep doing for the community.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me when you mentioned St. Mark. St. Mark is significant to me because that's where I went to church as a child. My parents were married there. I took not my first communion, but I was confirmed in the Catholic Church at St. Mark's. That's where I took my confirmation. And then, as you grow, you move away from those legendary landmarks that, was a strong symbol in the Black community. And now it's, they now have to save that symbol right now. But I think also the history of Avondale is very unique in terms of first Avondale as a whole, then it was split between South Avondale, North Avondale South Avondale became Avondale, and then North Avondale remained North Avondale. And how the white Jewish flight, many moved out near Bond Hill, Amberley Village, and a few stayed in North Avondale, because I grew up with several Jewish students attending North Avondale Elementary. So, I mean, it's just interesting to hear all that history again intertwined and experiences and things like that. What do you hope for the future for Urban Roots podcast?
Well, I hope that we can generate funding to really get more episodes out, and the episodes that will come for season 2 will be more focused nationally and internationally. And we've actually got some really great stuff that we will share on Greenwood Cemetery in New York, and Biddy Mason and Madame C.J. Walker. It's kind of taking the larger, more prominent people of Black urban history, but people that are not necessarily prominent at all in a way too. So we're just trying to highlight some of the really neat things these women have done, and what Greenwood Cemetery is doing to highlight the Black portions of the cemetery, and just different things to get people to really hear about some interesting minority history, be like, oh wow, that's really neat, I didn't know that about that, and maybe hopefully people can start to think, okay, well, maybe we should include these things in our history books. And I think I just really want Urban Roots to sort of just plant the seeds in people's heads to get them to start to think about how we could all systematically make change together by making sure people have open minds about the histories they learn, and B, really looking back at policy and education, and making sure that the mistakes of the past aren't repeated. Those are very important lessons that we're trying to teach, and I'll really try to make sure that all the episodes do have like a city spinner, or a spin on like digging into history in a way that might not be found from other podcasts, just because I have a little bit of that urban planning, historic preservation background that I think just provides a little bit of a unique experience to, for example, with the Evanston episode, essentially the buildings were the protagonists, and that was, a very unique way to kind of take a podcast episode. And the other ones for the Lost Voices series are very much more community based. And I have to shout out to South Cumminsville, because that story will be really heartwarming, I think, for a lot of our listeners. And I hope that everybody will really enjoy how community oriented and tight knit South Cumminsville really is.
Yeah, I admire South Cumminsville because even despite their many struggles and setbacks, their community council is thriving, and they're just trying to move forward to make that neighborhood better than what it is. I also want to make a suggestion. You might want to look at the Woodland Cemetery in Dayton, Ohio. Paul Lawrence Dunbar is buried there, along with the Wright brothers.
Okay, great. Yeah, you tell me as I'm taking notes. So no, that's a good one. I mean, I think that that I welcome any of your ideas. So
well, I mean, Dayton, just to talk about Dayton, Ohio for a minute, they have an Air Force base there, but the fact that the Wright brothers settled in Dayton, Ohio after the historic flight at Kitty Hawk is significant, and the fact that there are several references to Paul Lawrence Dunbar within the Black community there in Dayton, and they honored him. I think they named a high school after him or something, and I think his house where he lived is still standing. And my father lives in Dayton, so that's the only reason why I know this. And they, from a historical sense, Dayton is a hidden figure because they also have who was the Olympic runner who they've named a street after, Meadows. Well, I think it was Mark Meadows, or something like that, or Martin. I can't think of his name, but I remember Meadows, Medellin, something like that. They have a street named after him, and he was an Olympic runner. So Dayton is an aspect of a hidden gem that most people don't look to for things. What else are you involved with, Deqah, besides Urban Roots?
So I started a nonprofit to umbrella the podcast under, so we could start applying for grant monies, like for real. And because this podcast really has taken so much time, and it's been really difficult for Vanessa and I and our editor Connor Lynch to make happen so quickly. It really stretched us pretty thin because we had a 6-month turnaround period for it, but we are so happy with what we've been able to put together and just want to keep doing it so badly. So what's next is hopefully more podcasts, but also Urbanist Media is designed to essentially link preservation and planning and kind of history in that digital sense. So, you know, with podcasts and perhaps other types of podcasts that we can start to produce that, you know, could maybe be more, you know, mini episodes where we dig into lots of other cities in Ohio, smaller cities, or you know, even rural areas. It's not, you know, Urban Roots is called Urban Roots, but you know, we all they're the roots. Where are the roots coming from? Well, some are from the rural areas. So, you know, we want to be all encompassing and make sure that, you know, we're, you know, doing everything we can to make sure that planning and preservation is just more inclusive and accessible for all people and easy for people to understand. So for example, like, you know, things about housing, zoning, or, you know, blockbusting and redlining, the historic terms too, that people are not really familiar with. Well, we want to try to make those, you know, synthesize them and make them something that people can, you know, easily understand. So whether that's, you know, through Urban Roots podcast, where in the Avondale episode we specifically dive into those planning you know, mistakes and the you know, racist housing practices that occurred as a result of a really terrible you know, couple of centuries plus for African Americans. And from that, or also for you know, the digital, like, print standpoint. So people should keep an eye out on our Instagram at Urban Roots Culture. And I will be posting lots of different things there that are not just photographs, but also a little bit of digital media to get people's, you know, heads thinking about some of the other important topics and issues and concerns and things that, you know, we should be talking about on the regular as a community.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
John?
Yes. And thank you, Deqah. Thank you, Andria. Thank you, Suhana, for contributing to the news stories of the week. Greatly appreciate it. And guys, make sure to check out the stories we talked about today on our website at www.thecincinnatiherald.com. You can also check out our print edition, which is sold at your local Kroger, UDF, Walgreens, Joseph F. Booksellers, and at select service stations. Make sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. We're on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, and TuneIn Radio. Just search for the Cincinnati Herald podcast. Follow us at the Cincinnati Herald on Facebook. Follow us at Cincy Herald on Twitter and Instagram. And you can also follow us on YouTube. Just search for the Herald TV. I'm John Alexander Reese, digital editor of the Cincinnati Herald, and have a good day.